Welcome to our poster studying the perception of motion structure in dynamic visual scenes. This is work by Sichao, Jan Drugowitsch, Gershman, and myself, Johannes. Motion structure, that is, correlations in velocity, is ubiquitous in real-world scenes. Consider, for instance, watching these running giraffes. You will immediately group them together to form a herd and then perceive the velocity of individual animals relative to the velocity of the herd. This allows you to track animals even when they are temporarily occluded, to predict their future trajectory, or more generally, to make sense of the visual information that hits your retina by organizing perception within a meaningful structure. These structural relations are often latent. The concept of a herd velocity is not something that you observe directly. It is an abstract concept, a latent variable that is identified by your mind and then employed to integrate the visual stimulus. In this work, we ask what are the computational principles that underlie the identification of latent structure in visual scenes. To address this question, we developed a psychophysics experiment that uses analytically tractable motion-structured scenes. These tractable stimuli allowed us to formulate a Bayesian observer and then to evaluate human percepts, and especially their error patterns, under a normative account of structural inference. Furthermore, we can design highly ambiguous motion scenes and see what role uncertainty and ambiguity play in human visual motion perception. I will walk us through these steps in the next 3 slides. In the psychophysics task, participants were presented with short scenes of 3 moving dots. After the scene had ended, they reported which latent structure they believed underlay the dot's motion and the confidence in their decision. Each scene followed one of 4 structures: independent motion, where dot velocities are uncorrelated; global motion, where all dots share a joint motion component and also have some individual motion; clustered motion, where 2 dots are grouped together; and hierarchical motion, where a cluster and the 3rd dot share an additional global motion component. Trials were generated stochastically, such that all motion structures had the same location distribution, and all dots had identical marginal velocity distributions. This left velocity correlation, motion structure, as the only difference between the stimuli. Let us take a look at the human data. The confusion matrix shows the average human choices relative to the true structure of the presented scenes. We find that humans can solve the task, but they also feature distinct errors. The tractable task design allowed us to formulate an ideal observer based on Kalman filters. This observer calculates the likelihood of a trial under each of the possible motion structures. When we evaluated human choices as a function of the ideal observer's log odds, we found a sigmoidal psychometric function as expected for correct inference. Indeed, the psychometric function was accurately predicted by a Bayesian predictive model that wraps a small set of known human imperfections around the Kalman filter's Bayesian core. Furthermore, this model replicated the confusion matrix of human participants, including their error patterns. This suggested that human motion structure perception could be explained as Bayesian structural inference. We put this hypothesis to test in multiple ways. We compared the Bayesian model's predictions against the model without a Bayesian core. The Bayesian model explained human responses significantly better. We probed human structure perception under particularly ambiguous motion scenes by merging between 2 prototypic structures, a scenario where reasoning with uncertainty becomes especially relevant. We looked at the predictions of individual participants and individual trials, and on the subjective confidence that our participants reported in each trial. All these responses were explained well by our simple model. Therefore, we conclude that humans perceive hierarchically arranged motion scenes in close similarity to artificial observers of Bayesian structural inference.